So thanks everybody for joining. So today we're going to shift focus a little bit. So we've been talking about kind of automating the user lifecycle. Today we're going to talk about basically workflows, creating access requests, and also creating custom forms. So they're all kind of interrelated. We're shifting the outline a little bit. Originally we had we had planned to kind of talk about SOD and identity verification. We're going to push that off to the last session largely because those are the features only in 4.2.2, which is coming out, in the next few weeks. And I'd rather focus on things which are, in the current release and then talk about them at the end. Okay. So when we talk about these topics, we're going to start with workflows first, largely because it's the one common link which is there between all of the access requests capability and also the form templates that we have. Okay. So when we talk about workflows, we can look at it a few different ways. One is that it's another way that we can extend OpenIAM. So we, have looked at a few different options. The most light way to extend OpenIAM was to, using configuration, business rules, things like that. The second way that was fairly open-ended was to use the out-of-the-box script, to use the Groovy script capability, right? Workflows are yet another way, and the last way that we can, extend OpenIAM is to use the API layer, and we'll be talking about that in a few sessions. So the workflows, they're you can think of them they're a little bit different than how the scripts work. The scripts are kind of like you invoke them and whatever logic is in those scripts, they will execute, right? So it's kind of like a single step of executing a body of work. The workflows, you can think of them as having, multiple steps. They may have different people involved in them. So it can, have, more of a broken out step-by-step execution, right? And so the way that we implemented workflows in OpenIAM was that first we use an open source workflow engine. It's called Activity. It's been around for quite some time. It's a stable workflow engine, and it uses a standard notation called BPMNN, where you can use that format to create your workflow definitions. So in concept, these workflow definitions should really work with any BPMN compliant workflow engine. Right now, obviously, we've already integrated it with Activity, and that's the workflow engine that's going to be used internally, right? But so there's quite a collection of templates which we already provide out of the box, and I was kind of shared a screenshot here, and kind of showing the various workflows which are there, and they cover things like creating requests, new users, adding a group, adding a supervisor. So uh, these placeholders are already there, and so you can leverage these workflows for the things that you need to do. Okay. So all the workflows that we have, they're all multi-approver ready. So which means that you can add n number of approval steps in your workflows without having to change the underlying workflow definition. All the workflows also support SLAs, meaning that there is a certain amount of time in which a step needs to be completed by that end user. So for example, if an approval for access needs to be, say, completed in, let's say, 3 days, we may want to send out a reminder after a day to let that person know that this task is still not completed and they need to get to it. All the workflows also have escalation capability. What that means is that if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do and they haven't handled their workflows, then the escalation configuration can be used to, basically let someone know that this work has been done. So, and you can have an escalation chain. So you can say, well, maybe you send a notification to their manager saying that, this user hasn't completed their request for this task. Can you give them a nudge to get it done, right? And if still things don't get done, then you can escalate higher. And So it can become quite intrusive, and it eliminates the need for users to go and keep an eye on who's getting things done and chasing them to get these requests done on time. Right? Another thing to keep in mind is that all workflows in OpenIAM are modeled as resources. So, and resources are part of the access control model. So we have we have organizations, groups, roles, and resources that make up this model. And so by modeling them as a type of resource, you can now control who's allowed to execute a resource or not, right? And that was the reason why we did it that way. Okay. So when we're talking about access requests, so access requests, it's basically a way for end users who have access to the self-service portal to be able to come in and create requests for access. And so, let's say, for example, you're working on a project, you need access to a certain shared folder, and that the organization is using, or you need to be part of a group membership. So you can go in the self-service portal, find the application or service that you want, um, you know, pick that request, put it in the shopping cart, check out, and then it will go to whoever the approvers are for that, particular entitlement or application to get it approved. Um, so when you're going through this, and sorry, one more thing is that you're not necessarily limited to asking for access for access. Right? The way the catalog is structured is that you can have resources that you can pick, right? And then you can ask it and so forth. And the reason I say that is that you may have, some things which are not really controlled by OpenIAM. So you may have something like, well, I want to request access, maybe I need a laptop, maybe I need physical access to a building. Now, these are not things that OpenIAM controls, but what you can do is you can request access in a central place, and then you can um, when it's full, completed, you could open up a ticket in your ticketing system, say like a ServiceNow, um, to have that request be completed, right? So, going back to requesting access from the catalog. So when you're picking that access, you're gonna select and we'll go through all of this and I'll kind of show you how it works. You can pick the application or the entitlement that you want, put it in a shopping cart. You can, at that time, define how long you want that access. So for example, you may say like, well, I want sudo access to this group of Linux servers, on Friday evening because I'm doing maintenance on it, right? And that could be one type of access. And the justification there could be, well, I'm, doing maintenance, right? And somebody will approve it. And then if you have approval, your account will be activated, you know, um, at the time that you say that you needed it, and then it will be taken away in a time that you allocated for it. So and that's not something that you need to control. So this is where OpenAM can also be used for granting some level of privileged access, right? So you can say, well, uh, I want these elevated privileges, do the work, and then this gets taken away. Right? Then we have you know, these the way that access requests go through their approval flows is that it's basically using the workflow engine, right? So those workflow templates that we have, they're being used by the access request framework to be able to do what they want. And as I said before, you may have requests that you create which are not um, which are not applications or entitlements that we can automatically create them, but you may need to open up a ticket in a ticketing system. And so ServiceNow is probably the one that comes up the most. And there are two ways that we can integrate it. So one way is we can integrate at the API level. So there's a simple integration that we have that will basically connect to the ServiceNow API, create that ticket, and off it goes. Another way is that ServiceNow and most ticketing systems allow you to send, messages, email messages to a mailbox which is being monitored. And when a ticket comes in there, as long as it's following a certain format, it can parse it out and create a ticket for you, automatically. So if you're using something that's not, say, like if you're using Jira, for example, that could be a way that we can achieve that integration. So working our way through the access request capability, um, the way that end users interact with it is that there's a service catalog that they can see, they can drill down into it, and they can find the access that they want. So the organization is that you have these categories. These categories are a way to organize the applications or the resources that you have. And we provide some out of the box categories that can kind of have a place to start, but you can adjust it to be what you want it to be. And you can have child categories. So you can say, for example, let's say I have a category called business applications, right? And then I can click on that, and there could be additional categories, like it could be all my sales and marketing applications, all my finance applications, and so on and so forth. So you can organize it how you want to, and then link to these categories um, are basically your applications. Now, categories are also they're also a type of resource. And again, the reason for making them resources and leveraging that access control model is that it automatically allows us to control who can access these objects, right? So by default, the catalog is defined so that everyone can see everything in that catalog. And so it's open-ended to begin with. But if you go into the web console and you go into the administration section, there is a checkbox in there where you can say, um, you know, basically you want to turn on authorization, right? So there's a checkbox with some, weird phrasing that says, is, create request categories authorization disabled. Um, Basically, if you turn that on, it turns on the RBAC model, right? So now you can say that only people who are entitled to certain categories can see the applications underneath them. Right? Okay, then we talk about approval flows. So um, all of these workflows, they have this menu option on the sidebar that's called approver associations. And approver associations lets you define the approvers. And you can literally have n levels of approvers for each workflow. Um, Now, even though we allow n levels of approval, there's a practical limit where you're going to start driving people up the wall if you really go beyond. If you go beyond 3 levels of approvals, it's going to start getting annoying for at most companies. It's just too many people to have to work through. And for each approval step that you have, you can define the approver. And it could be, there's some predefined options, like, for example, it can be your supervisor. It could, um, you know, there's things like, the entitlement owner or the application owner or the entitlement admin. It can, and also, and you could pick specific people, and it could be a specific person who's an approver, or it could be a group of people. And if you pick a group, what the workflow engine will do is when that notification comes, it will send a message to all the people in that group. And then the first person to claim that request, there's a button which you have to hit claim. And if you claim it, you can then work on it. If you decide you don't want to work on it anymore, you can unclaim it, right? So you can have individuals, you can have groups of people, and kind of go from there, right? Um, Another thing that you want to keep in mind is where you define these approvers. So especially when it comes to the applications and the entitlements, you can define the approval levels at either the application level or at the entitlement level, meaning like the group or role level, right? If you have a really large catalog, where you have, you know, 50, 100 applications, maybe more, and you have thousands of entitlements underneath them, And if you want to define them all at the entitlement level, it's going to become a gigantic pain to maintain them, right? So my recommendation is if you want that level of control, define the approval level at the application level and then override it at the entitlement level. So meaning that any entitlements where the approval flow is different from what you have at the application level, you can just define that. You'll find that that is significantly easier to maintain than doing it the other way, right? If you're going to define it at the entitlement level, you may want to use the automated tools like bulk loading this information in there, and as opposed to doing it by hand because it's just not it's not something which is practically feasible. Okay. Let's talk. Let's shift over and go through how this would actually work in practice, and then we can then go through the forms, right? So let's just do like a quick demo of how this would work. Let's let you log out of this, and let's just say that we logged in as a manager, for example, right? So we're looking at more the end user side right now, and we're going to go and then go back to how we would set everything up. So if so in this case, I'm a manager. If I go to view my direct reports, I see a list of people who I want to go, and I can create a request for, or I can come up here to the header and I can type in, you know, right, and I can pick a person and I can create a request for them. So in this case, let's just pick a sample person. So you'll see that these options here. Again, this is all role-based. I can turn these on and off. I can create a request. I can review their access. I can enable, disable, and a few other options here, right? So let's go ahead and create a request. And so now I'm going to get this, um, go into the catalog. And so this is what I was saying earlier. I can pick business apps, and now I have some categories underneath them. And I can drill down and I can see the apps which are there, right? In this case, I'm going to say I want, certain ED groups, and maybe we're going to, just take two of these groups. It's going to end up in the shopping cart up here. And then I could say, well, this one really only needed for, maybe 5 days starting next Monday, right? And save that. And the other one can be open-ended. And then the reason why, it's in demo, right? And at this point, I'm going to say, yep, I'm going to review it. Everything looks okay. It's going to submit, and it's going to start um, that workflow. And I can go to view my requests. So these are all the requests which I have created. And so you can see that these two have been split up, and because they go into two different owners. One's going to Anton, another one's going to the security manager. And so if I look at it, and so the actual approval flow was actually Jack, who was the manager, and then there was a security manager. And since the workflows are set up so that if I create a request and I am the approver, it's going to autocomplete, meaning that it assumes that you knew what you were doing and you don't need to approve your own request, right? Which is usually the case. You can also view your progress here. You can see who it goes to, right? And you can work from there. And I'll go through the approval part of this in a second. I also want to show you that you can go to direct reports, and in this case, I can initiate a bulk request. So let's say I wanted to create a request for all three of these guys. I can say next, and again, I'm going to end up at the same place, and I can, in this case, go ahead and, pick an application, and this one only has one entitlement, and just go ahead and create that request. Again, it's a test. And again, it will take all three people, and it will now create three different requests because you may approve them differently, right? So again, same capability, just slightly different for if you're creating bulk requests. Right? So let's hop over to the security manager and look at the reviewer interface. Okay. And if I look at, again, this inbox, and let's just pick one of these, right? If all of this looks okay, I'm going to approve. If I don't like it, I can reject it. If there's multiple things in a request, I could have done a partial approval. If I'm not the right person, I can delegate this out to someone if I want to. There's also out of office you can turn on, in which case it will redirect to the person that you leave as your delegate. So that could be handy if you're going away. And if you have things in your inbox and you turn on out of office, you have the option to take all the current ones that you have and assign it to your delegate. They might not be too happy about it, but at least you'll have an empty inbox to start with, right? So that's some basic capabilities around it. Question that always comes up a lot, is do you need to use the OpenIAM interface to do this, right? And the answer is no. Everything that we've been doing has been coming into my inbox in my email. I can directly approve from my email if I want to. There's also a Microsoft Teams plugin in 422 that Teams plugin. If your company is using Teams, you don't have to you don't have to leave. You can just say approve, just click on a button right in Teams, and it will kind of go through. There's a question that says if you assign approvals to a delegate, can you review what actions they took at a later date? Yes, you can. So you will have visibility into what actions that they have taken as well. You know? And the audit logs they will also show that you had delegated this out, and it was the delegate who did the approval. So from a compliance standpoint, you will have traceability into how this was done. Um, okay, so let's log out and log in as an admin and talk about how we go about setting all of this up. Okay, so I'm going to go to the web console. So first thing, as soon as this refreshes, okay. So a couple of things. Let's just kind of go through the things that I talked about earlier. So in terms of where those resource files are located for the workflows, if we go to Web Console and under go to Access Control, and you go to Resource, and if you filter by activity requests, you will see all of the various templates which are there, right? Um, so for example, if we look at like this create user request, you'll see some things about, how it's defining the resource, but then you're going to see the approval flow here under approver associations, and entitlements will control who is allowed to execute this particular resource. And then you saw, like when we were creating that request, that there were some questions to answer. And of course, my example had a kind of a nonsensical thing, like why are you asking for this? But in reality, you may have a much more detailed set of things, again, to support compliance about why this, and you can, so for any one of these things, you can come in here and you can add a question, and says, for example, in, um, and so, and you can say, what kind of answer are you looking for? Is it going to be, a text message, right? Or is it going to be a select drop down, and or it's going to be a multi-select, right? Depending on how you want to shape this, is this required or not? And if you needed to do something truly custom, you can have a Groovy script that you introduce here. Usually you don't need to do this, but again, it's kind of meant to keep this open. And and once I save this, um, so what this will do is when this question comes up, it'll show a text box, right? Let me just see what happens if I pick a different question, if it's a multiple choice. I need to follow up on how we kind of define these select questions. This is okay, but that's kind of the general idea around this. So once we create these resources, um, and we have this on, so the next part is kind of creating that catalog structure, right? So in a way, when we loaded all the groups from 80 earlier on, we're in a way kind of feeding the catalog, right? So if we go again, access control resource, and this time we're going to filter by category. So you see application category, and this is going to be the category structure that we have, the top level categories that we were showing here, right? So if we go back to our self-service and we say create a request for myself, these initial top level categories, this is kind of what we're seeing here, and including any child categories, right? So if I want to create a new child category, and I can just say application category, um, you know, um, right? And I can just use the same label here. It's been localized in this way. And the status is active. And then I think I need to define the parent. Um, no, so once I define this, and I need to create the association. So I can come back here and I need to pull up a parent. So if I go back to resource, filter by category, let's just say, for example, we pick our business apps again. And if you go to entitlements, you see that there's the child categories here. And I can add another one in here. To get an application category. And so this was the test child category that created, right? So this way it should create a relationship. Now, these things are saved automatically, but there's a cache, and it usually runs about every 5 minutes or so. So you may not see these things come up right away. We'll check right now to see how long it takes. So we took business apps, and in this case, we saw it right away. So this is the child category that we saw. And then again, we'll have applications underneath here, right? So the way to get the applications there is we need to go to access management. No, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Go to web console again, go to provisioning, go to your managed system. And let's just, in this case, we'll take our SQL server and we're going to assign it to that category. Right down below on this form, you'll see the categories, and you'll see, pick our test child category here, right? And hopefully at this point, again, let me just refresh this. Go to business apps. I'm going to pick child category. And this is the MS SQL Server, right? And whatever entitlements that it has, you will see it kind of work through, right? Um, so in this case, you see that there's an option which is already grayed out, which is it's showing that this user already has this access. And you can't request access that you don't have. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next part of this, which is to talk about forms. We use forms, or to again be able to create an interface which is a little bit more in line with what's needed in terms of the business, right? I mean, there's no way that we can create an out-of-the-box solution that is going to handle every single need. So the idea behind these custom forms was to be able to model, what was needed in terms of the business, right? And so far, we have this form capability to support, users, and it's not just to create new users, but even just to edit them as well, groups, roles, and manage systems. Um, you can define custom fields, you can, and shape the contents of it. You can define field level validation on them. That being said, this capability is going to expand significantly in the releases coming out in the second half of this year. So we'll, on one hand, be closer to what we can do in a self-registration, where we can have multiple pages to have more of like a web flow to break up how the form can be organized. The other part is there'll be more control in terms of the page layout capability to make it a little bit nicer. And then the third part is that there'll be additional capabilities to be able to pull data from other sources. Especially within the government, we have scenarios where we need to be able to pull data from other external sources and be able to populate it. Like everything may not reside within OpenIAM, right? And so this gives us, so as this evolves, it will become a lot more user friendly, and the interface to be able to construct these will also evolve into, to support that capability. So once we did these page templates that we create, they are associated with a URL or multiple URLs, right? So the content providers that we initially set up when way back in the first session when we installed OpenIAM. And I think I mentioned that OpenIAM can have multiple content providers. And so these URLs can be used in different places, and it allows us to reuse the template definition. So for example, if we create a form to create new users, if we can use that same form for both creating and editing users, then we don't have to create another template for the edit user capability, right? So that was kind of like the idea behind them. And also when we describe the contents of the form, you can have a mix of predefined fields, the ones which come with OpenIAM, and then you can have custom attributes that you can create, okay? So with that said, let's jump over to the form templates and create some tests there. Okay, so again, we'll start from the end user side. There's, like I said, there's numerous places that we're using it. Here's one obvious one. So if you are in self-service and you come here, well, maybe not. If you go to manage access, go to say new user, you'll get a drop down that says, what kind of user do you want to create? And let's say you want to create an employee, and you'll get a form here. So this form that you're seeing here is not our out-of-the-box form. So again, this was a request for, again, I believe it was a federal government, example that we're trying to basically show that they have within the military a form. I think it's a 2872. Can't remember exactly, but there's an out-of-the-box form which which is used to for all access, whether it's for new hires, access, whatever. And so the question was, could we create that template, right? And so basically we added a whole bunch of custom fields to be able to render how this would work, right? So now that being said, there is one limitation in these form templates right now, that for a given menu option, you can have one template that's associated with it. So you can't have a different template for, say, contractors and for employees. It may, it will, the reason why we ask that is we add and remove the custom fields, which may be unique to that metadata type, but it's not really a separate form, right? So it will adjust based on what that type definition is. And again, these are some of the improvements which are there, and as we keep evolving, um, that it's not going to be a form that just linked to the URL. It'll be a form that you can link to a URL and maybe a certain action on that form, right? So just keep that in mind. So now that we looked at how we can do this, let's go to the web console again, and we'll take a look at the page templates. And they have got a few examples here. So in this case, I've got a page template that's used in multiple places, and I can tell where it's being used by just looking at the bottom URL, right? And I can also see if I wanted to, um, add another example here, and it will search and say, well, if I wanted to use it for edit user, for example, and self-service. So now the same template will be used in both places, right? And you'll see that there's a number of fields here, and I can go to the field types and I can say, well, maybe I want to add gender, to this form. And I can move this up right after date of birth. And while I'm at it, I can also, look to add, some localization. Is it required or not? And some validation rules around how I want this to be behaved, right? So maybe under certain conditions, I want to be, I want to hide, this message, or this field until certain other conditions are true. I can enable, disable, so various things I can do here with the validation rules, right? So let's say at this point, I don't have a field which I'm looking for. So I can go to my custom fields and I can create a new field, and I can call this my test field. So the question is, if the template field's out of the box, it includes all the out-of-the-box fields that we have for the user object and any custom fields that you would create, right? So it's a blend of both, right? And right. And here maybe I want to, render this a little differently, and I can have localize it, and I can say, well, yes, it's editable, it's not required, and how do I want to show this? And so, you can have labels that you create, you can, define sections. So all of these are not going to be things that you capture information for, right? So these could be kind of visual elements. So let's say in this case, I just want to add a text field, right? This required thing is not really required. Ignore it. It's a bug. And so at this point, I can go ahead and save it. So one thing I didn't do over here, I can go to metadata and I can link this field to a metadata type. So let's say I want to link this to a default user. I may also want to include this with contractors, right? So it can be linked to multiple metadata types. And now I can go back to my page template. And let's say over here, under field type, I'm going to use my test field. And it's going to put it down at the bottom. It's going to put it at the end of the list. And let's say that I want to put it here after the user title. And again, I can go ahead and so I can control how wide it's going to be. Maybe I want it just to be 50% of the screen. And again, I can add validation rules there. So once this is there, assuming that the cache is refreshed, if I go to my new user screen and I say default user, somewhere in here, I should see, okay, I'm probably waiting for the cache to refresh. Okay. While we're at it, just want to do one quick thing. If I should do a new user and I pick, say, employees, yeah, it's the same field, just to remove things from here. But that's a general, idea behind workflows, creating your service catalog, and creating form templates. If there are any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. But this is what we had planned for our call today. And if there are no other questions, I will see you next week.